Hello, the internet!
And welcome to another episode of
8-Bit Podsmash! Woo! We're your hosts, Penguin and Termite.
Aren't you supposed to introduce a boat?
I am, but we have a tagline as well.
Where gaming goes to grab a beer. Cheers.
That was awkward.
We'll
apologize for that strange intro. Yes, this episode, I have decided, is our frigate, which is just a type of warship.
Oh, just frigate.
Frigate, yeah.
All right, cool.
This is our frigate episode, so we're gonna frigate.
People cuss like sailors. I wonder if that's why, some sailors went to church and they weren't allowed to cuss or something, or, didn't feel comfortable cussing, so they're like, you want to go out to lunch? He's like, well, frigate.
So what do you think the ship was called before they decided?
Who knows?
Yeah, no, it's got a whole different name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just a warship, huh?
Yep, it's a type of warship. I didn't really read that much further than that on the Wikipedia entry.
You are starving our audience of amazing ship technology details.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well,
I want to know everything about it. What kind of engine it had, horsepower, how many knots,
look it up.
How many guns. Did you just give me T-Rex arms?
Yes.
Okay.
It's my new favorite gesture.
Well, penguins have similar arms to T-Rex, right?
Yep.
Minus the fingers.
The flipper claws. So, what's going on in the world of Termite today?
Well, I sliced my finger on a blender blade, so I thought maybe it was more wise to wash the blade in the dishwasher instead of hand washing it. Hand washing it would involve slippery soap, sponges, or a rag with soap, and holding it with one hand while trying to wash each individual blade by hand, right? That sounds very dangerous to me. So I laid it in the top shelf of the dishwasher on its side. And this is like a blade with a shaft of blades. There's three of them on this thing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I've got one.
So I was in a flurry of cleaning the kitchen, and then I decided I would just grab a cup and throw it in there, and I didn't see it. And all of a sudden, ow! I saw white in there. There was white in the wound. Not that I had passed out yet. That was coming later. So my wife was giving my son a bath. She was very indisposed at the moment, and I went in and I freaked out. I had no idea what was going on. She's like, just get some gauze and put some pressure on it, and I'll take a look at it when I'm done, and hang on.
Wow.
So she comes out with iodine, and she's awesome. Dressed the wound. She opened up and said blood just poured out of it. And I couldn't look at it. I couldn't watch it because it was just nope. I wanted to pass out.
Nope.
And the funny part was I was only scared that I had broken a tendon or gotten into the bone or something. I was scared of long-term stuff. It didn't really hurt that bad. I wasn't worried about losing blood. But for some reason I got sweaty and I wanted to pass out. It's ugh. It was horrible. So I go to patient first and they put 2 stitches in it and here I am. Now I gotta wait 10 days, eat some antibiotics, and...
Yeah, well, now we're blood brothers of finger damage. I severed my tendon earlier last year. 2 years ago? It's been a while. 2 years ago. Yep. Sliced my finger right.
Index finger, right?
Index finger, and...
Couldn't bend it?
Couldn't bend it. Yeah, I had a similar reaction to you in the sense that, my very first reaction was, whatever, I've sliced my finger a million times. It didn't really hurt that bad. I was like, whatever, I've cut my my hands a million times. I'm not too worried about it. I don't really get scared of the sight of blood. But then I couldn't move my finger. And then I was like, oh, I need to go to the hospital and figure out what's going on. But yeah, good times. I had a just kind of a grown-up, I'll describe it, a grown-up moment. Just kind of oh, hey, this is a thing that sucks about growing up and life and how to just get over it. Yeah, being an adult. I was at a lake house this weekend with my family, and sometime on Saturday I was just looking at my phone, and I saw that a good friend of mine from Harrisonburg, had gotten married that weekend. And I asked my wife, I was like, did we get an invitation to that? And she said, I didn't see one. I never saw one. And I was like, oh, that kind of sucks that I didn't get an invitation to that. It's nothing to be, brokenhearted about. I'm not depressed over it, and I don't even, hold it against the person necessarily. I've decided that, I have to believe that, the invitation just got lost. I have to believe that they sent it to my old address, legitimately, because the only other options are they either just neglected and forgot about us, or they purposefully didn't invite us. I can tell you that almost all of, my old crew was there. This is a person, this is, my friend's sister. She was almost a sister to me. I went to Mexico with this girl. I went to, on mission trips. I did, a play with this girl. We were friends, we were buddies, so we were fairly close. All my old crew was there, and I'm I just have to believe that it was lost, because the alternatives I just don't want to, I don't want to think that I'm either been neglected or purposefully not invited.
So do you want to get her on our show and we'll ask her?
Yeah,
We'll
let's call her right now. Yeah, because while she's on her honeymoon, that's what she wants to do. Explain herself. Explain herself on the podcast.
Nope.
No, it's cool. Again, it's just one of those, like I said, it's an adult thing where I'm like, we're being attacked by paper towels, in case you guys are wondering about that awkward pause. Maybe we'll edit it out. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it is the week of Halloween, and we're talking about severing our fingers and tendons.
Spookies,
so
and the even more horrifying thing of not being invited to your friends' weddings.
It's pretty horrifying.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was just like a grown-up moment for me where I was like, you know what? I'm going to choose to believe this because, like, I still want to respect this person, and I want to have... And it's not one of those things that you can go up to them later and be like,
why didn't you
invite me to your wedding? I'm like, that's like so gauche. So I'm like, I'm not going to... I'm not going to do that, so instead I'll just complain about it on the internet. But no, I'm not trying to...
Is she going to listen to this thing and know who she is?
Probably not. I doubt it. It's enough time away that I'm like, like with what time we're recording this versus the time it'll actually air. And if she does, like, that's what I'm trying to say, is like, totally no bones about it. It was just like a grown-up kind of thing where I was like, oh, that kind of sucked that I didn't get to, like, celebrate with my friends. But... It was one of those things where it's like, a buddy of mine who was there, he started texting me about it, and he's like, this person was there, and this person was there, and this person was there, and I'm like, why are those people there? And it was also telling that, like, people were asking, why weren't me and Macy there?
Oh, wow.
And so
other guests?
Yeah, other guests who were there were like,
where are you?
Not to me necessarily, but to my friends saying, oh, where's Dan? And, like, he didn't even know. He was like, oh, I assumed Dan just couldn't make it. Dan and his wife couldn't make it. But see what I mean? Like, it was just a little weird. But I'm like... Whatever, it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm choosing to believe this about it because I think that's the most fair thing to do.
The internet can't see you shrug your shoulders.
Yeah, I could be all butthurt about it, but I'm not going to be butthurt about it. So
what are you going to do?
That's the last we'll talk of it.
All right,
and
that's
now,
what we're going to do about it.
We'll move on to our DLC for the day.
Dan loadable content.
Yeah, so it is... By the time this episode airs, it should be legitimately the day before Halloween. Spooky. Give me a spooky. We should edit in a spooky sound.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I'll edit a spooky sound in there.
Maybe
some like thunder crash. Yeah, good. So I have a special DLC planned for us today. We're going to talk about hauntings.
Ooh.
So, in this hypothetical situation, I feel like I need to set the scene. In this hypothetical situation, you're being haunted by a video game character that you have wronged, either within the context of the actions of the game, or the game somehow maybe you just like threw your controller at the screen. I don't know, like some action you did while playing that video game, or that your character did while playing that video game, has caused you now in the real world to be haunted by a video game character. Who is that video game character? What does the haunting look like? Like, how does it manifest? Show up in your dreams? Do you start, when you reach for yellow objects, do they turn into Pac-Man? Like, how does it manifest? And then third thing is, how do you get rid of it?
All right.
You got it?
I got something.
All right.
So I have angered Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid.
Okay.
But he's invisible, which is, you can unlock that item that makes you invisible when you beat the game.
Okay.
And enemies don't see you. So he's completely invisible with his stealth camouflage. And he is setting things around the house to make noises and like torment me, to make me think that I'm crazy.
How did you wrong him real quick?
Metal Gear Solid's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult.
Okay.
And so sometimes when you just die on purpose, you're like, forget this crap. You're angry. You're like, I'm never going to beat this boss. So you just run headlong into the tank that's trying to shoot you, or Sniper Wolf.
One time that
and you're just like, I'm done.
Him, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you just run straight into the enemy, and they shoot you in the face, and you die. So this is him responding to that. So he is tormenting me by running around my house, inside and outside, and making lots of noises. So in the game, you can like knock on the wall, like clack, 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 and then the enemies will hear you, and they'll come looking, and you can hide from them. It's hilarious. That's what he would do to me. He would just torment like me and get me to go walk up to him and brink, and then I don't see him. He's gone. That's the sound it makes whenever you attacks you. Yeah. So that's what the haunting would look like. Now, as for how I would get rid of him, I don't have a clue. Infrared sensors? Like, I'm not going to be able to just pick those up anywhere.
Maybe you can you appease him somehow? Is there a way to, like, appease the spirit of Solid Snake that's haunting you? The Solid Snake you've wronged?
I can't really think of a creative, fun way that would do that. I just go back and beat the game, I guess.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All
I mean,
right.
he just kind of grows old, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then the story switches focus to Big Boss, which is like his ancestor, and so he's probably just angry.
Yeah.
I don't blame him.
Okay.
He ages a lot faster because he's got like this fox dye thing in him, and like he's genetically modified. He's a clone of Big Boss, and like so everything's messed up, and he ages really quickly, and so he dies fast, and he ages faster than all of his love interests, and like he just grows up to be a lonely old man. He's grouchy.
Okay. All right. Mine is, I think that I would be. I think that not alone. I would not be alone, but I would be haunted by the spirit of Ares from Final Fantasy VII for letting her die.
But everyone would be
exactly.
There's no letting her
in
die.
this hypothetical
You
situation.
can't fix that.
In this hypothetical situation, everybody is haunted by Ares. Everybody who's played Final Fantasy VII is haunted by Ares. But me specifically, I'm haunted by Ares for letting her die. It's probably just a psychological condition for my own guilt for letting her die to Sephiroth, that jerk. And the way it manifests is like I see her every time I like start to get close to anyone. Then like I have a vision where they're stabbed by Ares from behind
by some
with
crazy
Sephiroth's
dude
sword.
with a ridiculously long sword.
Yeah, no,
from
but
the
it's not
sky.
Sephiroth. It's Ares. She's doing the stabbing.
she's doing it.
She's doing the stabbing to them. So that's how it's like. So
How many times has
like,
Macy died?
It's a
Your
lot.
wife?
A lot. She's been run through with whatever sword. I
you
don't
wake
remember what
up?
the sword is called. I wake up. Yeah, it's either a dream or it's like a vision, like a day vision thing, and it freaks me out. And I can't sleep and I can't eat. So to get rid of it, I have to commit seppuku as a Cloud cosplay.
Do you have to use the Buster Sword?
I have to get a legitimate Buster Sword. I don't have to actually commit seppuku. I just have to like simulate seppuku.
To give you guys a little, if you don't know what Cloud's Buster Sword is, it's the ridiculously huge, like unrealistically heavy. Like the sword would not be able to be used by any normal human being in the planet.
Yeah.
It's like 3 feet wide and like 10 feet long, and this sucker is massive.
Alternatively,
And if you were to commit, what do you call it?
seppuku, the ritualistic Japanese suicide.
Where you fall on your sword.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To fall on that, you'd have to like climb a ladder, and prop it up, and then like jump and land through it.
Maybe get like a trampoline. There you
go. That would work.
Trampoline on it. Yeah. I would think that the other alternative, if that doesn't require me dying, is maybe like get one of those guys who, one of those like dudes on the internet who commissions swords from video games, and get them to commission like a replica, like a accurate replica of Sephiroth's sword, and then burn it.
Okay, that one's like 15 feet long.
Yes, and so it would be really expensive, so it would cost me a lot of money to do it. So there's like here's the I have to bleed for it, and then burn it. So like I don't even get to put it to good use.
I can come up with a lot of creative ways in which you could make some money.
Well, if I'm putting together a Cloud cosplay, I don't see what's stopping me.
You better jump on that.
So that's my haunting. That's my hypothetical. That's my October 2017 hauntacular story.
DLC.
Brr, 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 brr.
The rap horns make it every episode.
Every single one. Yep, ever since like episode 4, that's been it. So
I think it was before that.
was it before that?
I'm
Were we
not
really
sure.
doing rap horns? I don't know. You tell us, audience. When did the
Keep
rap
us
horns
straight.
start? And should we stop? It's the more important thing.
If somebody giggles, I guess it's all right.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, so what are we talking about today?
So, The Atlantic, which is a website that has a bunch of articles, an article landed that questions whether storytelling is necessary in video games. So the topic we're going to discuss tonight is about this article. Video games are better without storytelling, is the claim the writer makes.
His name is Ian something or other, something, right?
We will have that in the description. I
Yes.
don't remember who he is.
We'll call him Ian for now.
Sure.
I think the overall topic could be summed up by we're going to be discussing, we're going to ask that question and talk about it. Should, does storytelling have a place in video games? Or why are stories important for video
general.
games? Or are they not? Mm-hmm. So we're going to be talking about that.
So, I want to start with talking about our knee-jerk reactions to the headline.
Mm-hmm.
We've both read the article. We suggest you guys read the article. It'll be in the description of our podcasts through iTunes, Google Play, Facebook, etc. You'll see it, the link everywhere. If you follow us, so follow the link, read the article, and you can see, if you want to get your own knee-jerk reactions first, you can go ahead and do that. So our first knee-jerk reaction, I mean, for myself, is maybe we should change the headline. Like, the article makes some sense, but it should read something like, games shouldn't focus so much on the storytelling, or... I mean, I believe by the tried and true statement of gameplay is king, as opposed to storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll dig in deep here in a few minutes about, whether or not games focus too much on stories and then the gameplay suffers, or if the game focuses so much on gameplay that the story suffers. And we're going to compare and contrast.
Yeah, my knee-jerk reaction to this article was, my first reaction, of course, to the headline was like, okay, no. But furthermore, as he goes on, he does himself no favor. I think you're right, and I think kind of funny. Their initial reaction to it was similar in the sense that, like, I think it's just a bad headline because he ends up completely contradicting himself. When you actually read the article, he says, oh no, there is a place for a specific kind of storytelling in video games, which we'll get into further later. So he says it should read more something along the lines of, like, video games should innovate storytelling in this direction, as opposed to saying, like, oh no, like, games are better without stories, I think the title. And that's wrong.
I think it's a clickbaity headline.
It's a very clickbaity headline, and it's annoying to me because it's kind of the same. It's along the same veins as our first episode where we talked about art, video games, the such claims as video games can never be art. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's getting annoying that people are like, they're clearly just saying things to just piss us off. You know what I mean? Like, it just kind of sounds like they're like, oh, this thing that you love, here's why you're wrong to like it, or here's why it's wrong that you like this aspect of it. And it's limiting. I find it limiting, and
it's a multi-billion-dollar industry that's huge. It matters.
Yeah.
It affects the economy now, the stock trading. Like, it matters.
Yeah, and it matters for the future as well. Like, not only the future of the industry, but the future of the medium, and just the future of, like, the way we tell stories, which we'll get into. So, I think that...
But if you can write a headline that reaches a multi-billion-dollar industry,
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to get followers, and the Atlantic's going to look awesome, and you
Sure.
yourself as a writer are going to look good to your company. Sure. So I understand why he would write an artitle headline like that.
That's like poking the beehive, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're just asking for millions of people to be like, yeah.
To be like, here's why you're wrong, and, 8 Reddit posts.
Yeah. To say the least.
Yeah.
All right, so let's take a step back outside of video games, novels, movies, etc., and let's just look at storytelling in general. So let's define storytelling. What do you think, Dan?
Well,
what is storytelling?
Stories are core to the human experience. I think you can't look at really anything without seeing stories there, and I'll explain a little bit more detail. How much of your day do you think we spend either telling or consuming stories?
I mean, I'm looking at my regular day of 9 to 5. There's no storytelling at work.
Is there not? I mean, do you not have a coworker that you come to and say, hey, I gotta tell you this crazy thing that happened?
No, that's true, especially on Mondays
We
after
are
the weekend.
constantly telling stories to one another, and that's just a natural human expression. It's probably as core to our survival because, we would have to say, beware of that side of the woods, there's tigers there. And then well, I don't believe you. That's ridiculous. Some of our best hunting's over there. Well, let me tell you about this time that I was over there and I got attacked by 8 tigers. You know what I mean? Like, we have been telling stories for as long as we've been people. I think that, other than maybe music, there's no form of expression that is as inherent to our being as telling stories. And I think that, there's something cool about that. We use them for everything, though. They always have a purpose. There's always a purpose to storytelling. It's either entertainment, it can be propaganda, it can be, there's good and bad sides of storytelling. You might be trying to use a story to convince someone to believe something that you want them to believe. We use stories for just kind of bonding, social bonding. We use them to pass on lessons and pass on, moral ideas. It's just like stories comprise such a major part of our day. I would say that we at least spend 50 to 60% of our waking days telling stories. And then we go to bed and dream and have dreams that are all weird, wacky narratives comprised of all the strangest elements of our lives.
Yeah.
That our brains are just like, that's what our brain decides to do when it's resting, is like come up with crazy
Take everything
random
we've seen and done,
things
thought, and heard
and
throughout
comprise
the
a
whole day
very
and
rudimentary
just random
story
all
out of
up.
it. Yeah, exactly.
Shuffle it into
yeah.
a deck and deal it out.
Yeah. So it's the reason I bring it up is because I think it's silly to say that, you know, storytelling has no place in video games because, well, what else? Like, what else are you going to do with video
What's
games?
the point?
I mean, yes, there are other things that video games can do and can accomplish, but like, why say that you can't tell good stories in video games? Because like, then you're just depriving yourself of another way to tell stories. I mean, that's every single time we've come up with a new form of art or a new form of expression, we then use it to tell stories. Dance, we use to tell stories. Music, we use to tell stories. As soon as cameras were developed, we started telling stories with motion pictures. Paintings tell stories. Like, everything tells stories, and there's always stories behind everything because we just are obsessed and addicted to stories. So, yeah. That's what I think storytelling is. It's a core part of who we are.
You know, he's kind of adding the idea that storytelling shouldn't be in video games. What about non-video games? Does a soccer game or a football game, is that telling a story, or outside of just the game itself? Because anyone could relay or replay in voice or in writing or through a telecast or whatever you want to call it, a recap, if you will, or a highlight of a game that happened the night before. And you can say, you know, this quarterback threw it to this wide receiver and had this line drop. Like, there's so many ways you could describe a game. Outside of describing what happened on the field, does soccer or football tell a story? Is that storytelling?
To some degree, I would argue yes. It depends on the game, though. It depends on a lot of circumstances. But what's better to watch than the underdog winning the Super Bowl?
So you're saying the drama that the teams could possibly bring to the field. Mm-hmm. It's like, this matters. This game matters because this team was wronged by the other team in this other event that happened. Mm-hmm. This player said this on Twitter to this person, and now that's happening, and he's showing him up.
Well, and look what, again, I mean, love it or hate it, look what the WWE did for wrestling.
Oh, that's all stories.
Wrestling is a ridiculous, I mean, wrestling, not necessarily the wrestling as we know it, but wrestling historically was just a sport. It was just two dudes, like,
who could ever take
grappling and you know, and whoever could win the most points doing that. So it was a sport in the most inherent sense. And again, love it or hate it, there's a huge population of the country that loves the WWE, and that industry, you know, honestly, quite frankly, that industry was saved by the WWE. And yes, then you have mixed martial arts and stuff like that, but I mean, look at the Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor fight that just happened. Like,
so
hyped up, just because it was as much
That's
a
a perfect
story
example of what I was just talking about.
as it was a feat of athleticism. Mm-hmm. Yeah, athleticism.
Yeah.
Cool.
So why do we care about stories?
They're cool. I mean, yeah, stories allow us to do a lot of things. It allows us to essentially rehearse the way we would handle things. There's sort of two things that stories can allow us, which is escapism and wish fulfillment. So think about what do you want to do after a hard day of work? Go home and watch Netflix. Much of the motivation for watching Netflix is consuming a story, is being entertained by the story, so we get to kind of escape into the story and just kind of retreat from the stresses of our daily lives. Like I said, we kind of get to rehearse almost in a way how we would handle ourselves in those situations, as crazy and ridiculous as they may be. The other thing that I think video games capture really nicely is the wish fulfillment aspect. Think of how many main characters of movies are like ridiculously boring and bland. I'll say Harry Potter. Wife's
people gonna fight you.
Harry Potter's not a great character himself. He's not interesting. There's very little about his personality that is interesting, and that's on purpose. Piper from Orange is the New Black, my wife, is the example she gave of a female character that's like just kind of bland and boring. And then Neo from The Matrix, Keanu Reeves has made a career out of being this. But they're all there for a purpose. They're written that way for a purpose, and that is it's a already well documented phenomenon. It allows the viewer or the reader or the listener, whatever, to kind of project their own personality onto that character. And then therefore allows us to kind of complete the circle of the fantasy, giving us the wish fulfillment that we want out of the story. So, again, it's purposeful that Harry Potter is written without a personality because J.K. Rowling expects you to project your own feelings and your own emotions. You're supposed to empathize with Harry as the school hates him because they're hating you. And that's supposed to make you mad as a reader. Neo from the Matrix is told he's the chosen one. That's supposed to make you feel pumped up because you're the chosen one.
Interesting.
Video games can do the same thing. In fact, they do the same thing. I want to hesitate from bringing up Legend of Zelda in every single episode, but look at Link. He doesn't even talk. He's just a blank little elf character. That's because you're supposed to project yourself and your personality onto Link. Another great example is the Master Chief. You never see his face. He utters like a few words throughout the entire
him
game.
And Cortana's banter is about it.
Yeah, you're supposed to basically, it's because you're supposed to be Master Chief. It's supposed to be you doing those actions. So video games can at least satisfy that part of storytelling, narrative storytelling, better than, in a lot of ways, better than
So that's like that
movies.
Endorphin hit, that wish fulfillment, entertainment, escapism, all kind of wrapped up in a little bow. But you've used a whole bunch of video games as examples, and this article is trying to say that video games shouldn't have that element.
Yeah.
So what would a video game be if it didn't have escapism or wish fulfillment, if it was just gameplay?
Yeah, I mean, then that's when you get games like Tetris. Or even a lot of the competitive games. You're right, there should be very little point of a story in Call of Duty.
Yeah.
No one cares. Let's shoot each other. And let's
That's
give it
kind of the appeal of it. It's like,
let's give it a World War II flavor, whatever.
Right.
Like, just because
setting,
it's just a setting. It's
nostalgia.
Fun. There's no, the campaign in that game is completely pointless as far as I'm concerned, and I would agree. I'm not saying that every single game needs to have a story.
I will say, as Termite, the only reason why I like Call of Duty is because of the campaigns.
Fair enough.
I actually spend way less time online than the norm of those games attract like the mass, like grindy shooter types. The Battlefields, Call of Duties, like they just spend hours and hours and hours prestiging, and it's awesome. Kill death ratios, all that stuff. I just like the story. I buy them, play through the single player campaign, and move on.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's totally fine. What I'm saying is that, game developers shouldn't feel beholden to having to include stories into their games, but that shouldn't stop storytellers from considering video games as a medium on which to tell their stories, should they so choose. Don't get me wrong, I love the novel format, I love the movie format, but I would love to tell one of my stories in the form of a video game.
This is a great segue into my next question for us to talk about, is why does a story need to be told as a video game versus any other medium? We have comic books, novels, movies, music, articles, opinion pieces, editorials. There's so many different ways that you can convey your thoughts and emotions out to the world. Why would you choose a video game over anything else?
Yeah, I would ask that question, I would flip that question on its head and just say, cool, over the course of humankind, we've found so many different ways to tell stories. Why would you stop short with video games? You know what I mean? Like, we've just shown that we can innovate relentlessly in the ways that we can tell stories. So then why would we say, oh, here's this other way that comes with all these other interesting tools that we're just in its infancy figuring out how to use. We're just figuring out how to use, real-time events to tell stories. Love them or hate them. We're just figuring out how to use, environmental storytelling, which he gets into in the game, to tell stories. We're just figuring out how to do these things, and it comes with all these tools that you can't get in a novel, you can't get in a movie. So to say like, oh, well, to then put the focus on those things and say, well, then your stories are getting in the way of the gameplay and those things is a valid concern, but it's also limiting. It's just saying like, why not? So my question is then why not tell stories in video games?
Right.
Like
that is the perfect medium to tell a story.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily even, it doesn't have to be the perfect medium to tell a story, but we humans can tell a story in any medium we want. And so like, why then say like, here's the one you can't, here's the one you shouldn't?
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's stupid. Like,
you mentioned a term, environmental storytelling, and that's like it's becoming my favorite. I wouldn't say favorite, but it's becoming a very, very awesome genre. In 2017, there's a lot of these games coming out now that focus so much on environmental storytelling that they're called walking simulators. Like, people are mocking them because all you do is walk and interact with the environment.
Yeah.
But there's so much, like, that's the fact that that's even a game and that it's fun to play
Yeah.
is indicative of how awesome storytelling can be in games.
Yeah, and that people
otherwise,
like
you're
it,
just
yeah.
walking through if you remove. So environmental storytelling is like using audio and visual cues in the environment to kind of tell a story without actual dialogue and without actually being presented text.
Yeah, and then they usually come with some, like, lack of what you typically see in... So, for example, you might have a first-person game like Gone Home.
Yeah.
Where it's in the first-person perspective, but you're not using any of the gameplay mechanics that you typically are associated with that. You're not shooting guns, you're not sneaking up and stealth stabbing people. Like, you're just literally walking around.
There's even no antagonists. There's no characters.
You're just first person, and you're just finding clues in your environment.
This is the perfect example of what I'm talking about. It's all environmental storytelling. How do you get any story in this game is you walk through this house, you come home, it's dark, it's storming. I actually thought it was a horror game. I was a little scared. And you open doors and you walk into a room, and in this room are scattered about artifacts that tell you that, oh, this is set in the 90s. Clearly there's a VCR. There's TVs that looked like they were from the 90s, so you immediately attach your own nostalgia to it. And the story is told through reading cards, hearing audio tapes being played, and then just looking around at the environment to see how this family left the house. Did they leave in a hurry? Did they leave slowly? What made them leave? And so you can see all of these things happen just by being in the game. Another amazing example is Left Behind. You can actually tell that they left in a hurry. So Left Behind is kind of a post-apocalyptic, like an infection spread, kind of a zombie clone. Like they're just like these infected people that will attack you and have no recollection of their past life. Like you're completely consumed by this parasite and you're now just a freak and you'll go after someone. So the character, the main protagonist, is overcome by this. So he has his daughter and they're in their home, and at the beginning this event happens, and kind of like the zombie apocalypse, if you will, but they're not zombies, it's just some other infection that causes them to attack humans, and they escape and they get away. Then it fast forwards to like months later. I won't spoil too much of the story because the game is absolutely fantastic and you have to go play it. It's on PS4, they've remastered it. Go do it. Just go. It's awesome. So you can learn that a family left the house in a hurry because there's packed luggage not fully closed in the living room. You go upstairs into their bathroom, everything's disheveled, it's a mess. You can tell they've just like dug through to grab their necessities and trying to get out of there. Destroyed cities that are just completely wrecked. Suburbs where their lawns are overgrown. You can tell this happened a while ago. You can tell they left in a hurry, that they were scared. And like all of these things happen, and there's no dialogue to tell you that. And there's no text that's on the screen. You don't have to read anything. You're just experiencing it. And then the player has the full agency to just experience that as they want. Do you breeze through that and go on to the next story beat, or do you stop and take a look at the house and take a look at the yard and walk up and down the street and take this stuff in? It's up to you as the player. It's like it's fully engaging the player into how you can experience the story for yourself. And every single person is going to have their own kind of meta story to the story they experienced and how they played through it.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about earlier, where the writer talks a lot about environmental storytelling as well, and he lauds it. He actually says that that's what video games should be using. That's how they should be emphasizing their stories in the medium. And that's why I kind of buck up against the articles, because, again, he contradicts himself. He says, stories have no place in video games, but then he says, but environmental stories, sure, like, do more of that kind of storytelling. And
yeah, he was saying that storytelling almost got in the way of games.
Yeah, and
that we have walking simulators because we're focusing so much on the story that gameplay is actually taking a hit.
Yeah, but that's not what makes those games great. Yeah,
right.
You know what I mean? And then look at it, and then look at what we've... In this year alone, we've seen so many games come out, and Breath of the Wild's just still fresh on our mind, but look how much that environmental storytelling actually enhanced the narrative of that game.
Yeah.
The entire point of playing the game is to just go around and find all the clues about what happened to you 100 years ago. I bring up another example of...
But even the story of, you and I both emerged from the cave knowing we could do whatever we wanted, and we ended up doing the exact same thing, just turn around and climb the wall. Where someone else would have a different experience where they left in a hurry and died right away. Every single player in and of themselves has their
whole
own
new story about how they did it.
The meta story about the whole thing.
Yeah,
how did you play it versus how did you play it?
Yeah. But I also, he even brings up the point of BioShock.
Oh my gosh.
And how the story... But... So I just don't understand where his argument breaks down is, what is he saying? Is he saying that, oh, the environmental story was better than the narrative, but like BioShock's known for its narrative. It's known for its big twist there at the end. So in my mind, then the environmental storytelling of BioShock not only enhances the narrative, but it also enhances the gameplay, because like part of what that makes that game good is the atmosphere of being in this underwater city and exploring it and being scared by it. And so if you don't have a story or reason for being there, if you don't have a background, you know, if you don't have the events that took place before, you know, Rapture became Rapture as we know it, like, then none of the gameplay really, I don't see how they can get in the way of each other when they're only enhanced by each other. Which, again, I think that's one of the strengths of how stories can improve video games, is the narrative is motivating my actions. One of my favorite video game experiences of all time was playing through Halo 2. And, like, when they warped me up on that Covenant ship, and I'm like, oh, I'm on a Covenant ship surrounded by myself, it didn't matter to me, like, that I'm the Master Chief. That still scared the crap out of me. I'm like, I've been warped into a Covenant ship all by myself with nothing but, you know, you didn't even have anything until the cutscenes, like, then you grab a needler off. So you got a needler. You got, like, the worst weapon in the game up to that point. And you're like, all right. So there we go. So that motivated my action, and then combine that with, like, oh, the music got really awesome at one point. Like that storytelling, that narrative, it only enhanced the gameplay for me. And I can't be the only person who's had that experience.
I mean, one of the examples, going back to BioShock, is how they incorporated the non-cutscene kind of storytelling, where like you are still free, able to look around at whatever you want while story elements are happening. And one of the things is you come up on a wall and you see a shadow of a baby carriage and a mom like crying over the carriage, and it's a shadow, so you think you're gonna go around the corner and see this happening. Well, there's no baby, and the mom's just crazy, and like, so it automatically tells a story that something happened here where people are losing their sanity, they're losing their happiness, and she is a mother who lost her child. And so there's like that feeling of loss throughout the entire game. You see the characters in the game experiencing despair and anger, and that's all brought to you as a player through just the environment. Not, I mean, there is text, there is dialogue in that game, and it's awesome. And how they just flesh the whole story out by environmental storytelling, how much that adds to it. If you remove it, you just have a first-person shooter. Yeah. You might as well just play Call of Duty online. Yeah. Like, you're just shooting people for no reason.
Yeah. So we've been talking about how games can be enhanced by story, but what are some examples, do you think, because I know there are some out there, in fact, we're going to talk about some, but what are some examples of games where the story really did get in the way of the game, or the story was impeded by the game? So what are some examples of the things that he was talking about? Because, you know, he does have some good points. Like, there are some games where when you're playing them, you just want you either, like, the story's great and you want the story to be good, or the story's so bad that you don't feel immersed in the gameplay at all. So we got some examples of that.
I want to highlight the challenge that it took for me to come up with a video game that was actually hindered by its gameplay that had a really good story. Yeah. Like, just highlighting that fact, because story is so important to the gameplay, as we've just discussed. One of the games that comes to mind is Mass Effect 1. I remember being so enthralled by the sci-fi story for the first 3 or 4 hours. That game was amazing. This is like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, but it's not Star Wars, and it's just as good, and I'm fascinated by everything. I'm in.
Original story,
and of course, because it's the intro, they want to hook you. It's like chapter 1 of any book. That's the point of it. It's to get you in. The moment you have to start traversing planets in some stupid car for hours and like scanning them and finding mining points, and the pace was off, and you're slowed down so much that the game becomes extremely boring. And I tried to play that game like 3 times, and I couldn't get into it. So each of those 3 times was 3 or 4 hours. I'm into it, and I'm like, done. I can't. So that actually stopped me from playing Mass Effect 2 and 3, which I heard were way better. So that's a perfect example. Another one is Assassin's Creed 1. Just ridiculous, monotonous gameplay, but the story and setting were fascinating. The Crusades, and so I wanted to play that game too, but that never hooked me either, and that kind of impeded me playing 2, 3, 4, and all the rest of the Assassin's Creeds.
Yeah, one of my favorite examples of kind of the opposite, where the story like sucked and therefore the game suffered, is a game that I never even actually played, which was Destiny. the first Destiny
Yeah.
game. So we've been playing Destiny 2. Both you and I got Destiny 2, having never played Destiny 1, and we like it so
Hooks
far.
are in.
I'm enjoying it. But I read this story. I read actually a Cracked article, which we'll link off to, that I really think you all should read, because it's a fascinating example of how the story's failure really, really impacted the game. And the way it goes is Bungie actually hired like a crack team of writers. They had the Bungie veteran. I guess he worked on the Halo games.
They didn't really hire them. They just kind of assembled them.
Yeah,
within.
they assembled them. Yeah, so they had this crack team of story writers who came up with like this sprawling sci-fi epic. That one of the points of the Atlantic article is he's like, oh, these stories will never live up to the greats. And which is similar to Roger Ebert's argument about art as well. It's like, oh, these things will never compare to the greats. Well, this sci-fi epic very well may have, like, it very well could have been, one of the better sci-fi stories that video games have ever told. So they wrote this great story, and then they presented it to the development team, and they're like, no, this sucks. This isn't what we wanted. And so they scrapped the whole thing. So that's like that in and of itself is like a story in and of itself. So they rewrote, the developers, the not writers, rewrote the game weeks before it launched.
This was all internal to Bungie too. It wasn't like the producer and
it wasn't like Activision
conflict.
struck it down. No,
Right.
This was Bungie itself. They read and they were like, we don't like this. This isn't what we wanted, and then struck it all down. But they included bits and pieces of it in the Grimoire system or whatever, and we'll get into how awesome the story is in a second, but like the backlash that the players had, like the story was like, everybody was saying the gameplay is alright, but the story sucks.
Well, the funny part was the gameplay was like reminiscent of Halo, because these were the same developer team that made Halo, so they actually ripped Halo Reach code into, I say ripped off, but they made it, so it's not really ripping off anything, they owned it, they had it. But so they used Halo code, so the shooting mechanics were spot on. It felt so good after how many Halo games? I don't know, like 4. And so the mechanics of the game itself, the gameplay, running around, shooting, like headshots, just everything felt so fluid and felt so good, and like worked with the graphics, and like everything looked gorgeous and beautiful, and it was new for PS4 players. And so it was that part was fantastic.
But it just fell flat. The story, and Peter Dinklage's performance was weak.
And that's not even his fault.
No, it's not. He just had such little to work with because they rewrote it all.
And they told him he wasn't going to be a main protagonist, and then they made him the main protagonist.
Yeah, exactly. So it's crazy just how much this game suffered because of its gameplay. And I know that a lot of people didn't come back to it.
It didn't suffer for the gameplay. It suffered
for the story.
Yes,
how much the game suffered overall because the story fell apart, and they could not bring it back together until, again, it wasn't until they were starting to tell better stories with the Taken King and some of the later expansions that a lot of people kind of came back to the game.
Yeah, they had to backpedal and go back and flesh out stuff.
But what's so interesting is that the little bits that they kept from the writers that they've hidden, it's this really cool story about, what they watered it down to the light and the darkness, but they're actually telling what the original writers had planned was this battle of metaphors, and how the light represents the sky gods and the darkness represents these deep, it's called the deep, and they're the worm gods, and it's these two competing ideologies of the darkness or the worm gods, the deep. They think that competitiveness and competition, that living beings competing with one another, is the real true meaning of life. PvP. And then the sky, the light, they talk about how it's no cooperation that is what. So it's actually a metaphor for the gameplay itself. And then you engage in this world of metaphors where every time you fight the Taken are what kind of really represent this. The Taken are these beings that have kind of epitomized this. They've epitomized the philosophy of the deep, which is that competitiveness, becoming the strongest and the best, and they can only be killed by their own metaphors. So in order to kill them, you have to go through this portal, enter the sword space is what it's called, and you have to kill them inside their own metaphor, inside their own ideology. But when you're playing the game, you're going through a portal and fighting the Taken King. You don't know why you're doing it. You just know that you're doing it. You just go in and shooty, bangy, bang, bang.
Right.
You don't know why you're doing these things. Whereas, that's such an interesting thing. And if they had, wormed that through the narrative and through the cutscenes and through all the, what they're talking into
it would have made it so much more fun.
Would have made it way more interesting and would have told a really interesting story that's kind of, deep. It's not anything to shake a stick at, but it's Like, it's not, you're not sitting here talking about, like, Gandhi level philosophy or anything like that, but it's still better than what we got, you know?
Yeah.
So, we'll link off to that Cracked article. I found it really interesting. He talks about how there's 3 guns in the game. And the guns, you can scroll over in all the guns to look at, like, a lore panel.
Yeah.
And it tells a little story. Mm-hmm. There are 3 guns that I think they're linked together. I don't know how they're linked together. I don't know if they just are similar, but they're linked to the story. There's the Last Wish, the Final Curse, and Thorns is what they're called. And one of them, the lore talks about how they tell this little story, like a little kind of fable story about like cowboys. And one of them, the Last Wish or something like that, it's a handgun, a hand cannon that's like, you know, you fight like honorably. You know, you all draw at the same time and you fight.
So rules,
yeah,
structure.
There's rules, structure, and kind of teaching you how to use the gun. Interestingly enough, the other one is like it's a ranged weapon. It's like a scout rifle or something that's like all about, you know, getting headshots. It tells a story about, you know, the bad guy, the outlaw wants to just kill, and that's all it's about.
From the shadows,
kill from the shadows, you know, most efficiently and quickly as possible. And then Thorns tells a story about like the corrupting influence of evil or something like that, and so it's telling about so it's making these gameplay mechanics of like, oh yeah, like high damage at a close range, you know, we're on, like, it's like
hand cannon
where we can each kill each other, like we each have a chance, like it's about honor, but then there's like evil, and then there's like the corrupting nature of you know, evil over time. It's like these are DPS mechanics that they're then like motivating with story and like telling you how to use a story. Like,
it'd be so much better with all of that.
That's ambitious. That's super ambitious and super cool. None of it present. None, or at least if it's
I know
present,
a lot of the story for Destiny 1 was hidden online.
You have to dig for it.
Like, and like they took a lot of the story that they scrapped and kind of brought it back.
It's like they actively don't want you to know what the story is. Like they're actively preventing you from finding the story. And it's like, what? That's crazy. So we could have had this really interesting. So I really hope that, you know, with Destiny 2 and
so
whatever,
far it's good.
Whatever sequels, like, really hope they make an effort, put more of an effort into the story. So cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about? Stories?
Everybody's gone to the Raptor. I think I talked about it in a previous podcast.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Firewatch, Gone Home. This is the environmental storytelling.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I highly recommend checking those titles out. They are cheap. They're less than $20 a piece, and they're like 5 to 8 hours each.
Yeah.
They're just a couple nights. Journey is, oh my gosh, Journey is another one.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all games that don't use a lot of dialogue, and they don't use a lot of text, and they don't use like killing each other as a basis for a story. And I think it's a perfect example of why gaming is an amazing media for storytelling.
Yeah, I guess if I had to have any kind of closing argument or closing statement, I would just say that, like, this notion that, you know, these stories will never compare to the greats, like, it's a repeated idea that nobody in the contemporary times of which stories were told thought that the stories of the present time compared to the greats. Like, Shakespeare's contemporaries didn't think his stories compared to the greats and would last.
Yeah.
And it's like, but they did. It's only time can tell what stories will last. And, like, if you already look at the way people nostalgia, you know, over games like BioShock or The Last of Us that have, you know, that are known for their stories, like, in time, those games might be taught in English classes. I guess, you know, it's a stupid, I think it's a pointless argument to make that, like, oh yeah, they'll never live up to the greats. Well, give it time. If not this generation of video game storytelling, then perhaps another generation of video game storytelling. So
we both fleshed out pretty clearly that video games are only better with good storytelling.
Yes.
Without good storytelling, a game is not better.
Yes.
All right.
I think so. That's what I think. Tell us what you think, guys. Or tell us what video games you think
have no story and are really good.
Yeah, or have really great stories that you think that may be studied by future English classes.
All right.
But, yeah, we'll link off to the Atlantic article so that you can read it for yourself and come up with your own opinions. We'll link off to the Cracked article that talks about Destiny and how hilarious it is. Yeah.
The only two references
I think those are the two ones we pulled from. So, other than that, like, subscribe. We're a brand new baby podcast, so just
talk about us.
Tell your friends.
We're on Facebook. We're on Reddit. We are on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We are on Reddit. We are on Libsyn or 80bitpodsmash.com.
80bitpodsmash.com. YouTube. We have a YouTube
we're
feed.
on YouTube.
So
we
you
have
can
our
find
own
us
channel,
there.
80bitpodsmash.
Yeah, so listen, like, subscribe. We'll be on very soon. I think by the time this episode's released, you'll be able to find us on iTunes, Stitcher,
and Google Play.
Yeah, so if you want to listen to us directly through any of those.
And you can use your own custom player, use our RSS feed. You can find it at 80bitpodsmash.com.
Yeah, and again, comment. And whatever, if there are, I know that our website feed has, you can comment on us. You can send us an email.
I have a subreddit, 80bitpodsmash.
Post on Facebook, say hi, just say hi, or give us an idea, give us your thoughts on what kind of content you'd like to hear from us. If you have a topic that you think is really interesting that you want us to explore, that we'd be happy to hear what you guys think. If you guys have an idea for DLC, we're always looking for good DLC downloadable content bits. So yeah, please contribute.
And if you have a silly topic you want us to discuss, we can also do that too.
Exactly. So this is a shared community experience.
Absolutely.
But till next time, guys, it's been Penguin and Termite.
Signing off. Have a good night.